Here, I'm so happy for tonight's event. My name is Richard. I'm co-founder and speaker of Evolution of Leadership. So I will start with the Leadership Thursday event structure. That is going to be the time that we have right now, 7 o'clock to 9 p.m. And we're going to start with introduction and agenda review. That is going to be 5 minutes. The transition to speaker, that is going to be 7:05 to 7:10, another 5 minutes. The speaker presentation, 7:10 to 7:40, that is going to be 30 minutes. Intermission and slide promotion, 7:40 to 7:50 is about 10 minutes. The QA sessions in which you guys can start, any doubts that you have about our speaker with all, confidence, you can start asking. That is going to be at 7:50 to 8:50, 60 minutes. And the closing, 8:50 to 9, that is about 10 minutes. So you guys already know that with me is no spoilers, but I really can hold my excitement for tonight's event because I would like to make an emphasis that our individual for tonight has a disability. But despite the fact of that disability, you can still see the powerful mindset that she has. She's the founder of Access of LLC, in which she wants to give the knowledge and also a basic understanding for Americans with disability and the importance of it. So tonight, I'm so proud to introduce Addie Ray. Miss Ray, thank you so much to be with us tonight.
Thank you. I had to take myself off mute real quick. Can't forget to do that. Okay, first of all, I just want to do a quick little tech checklist, make sure everybody can see and hear me because sometimes that can be a little slice and dice. So are we good to go?
I think we're good.
All right.
If the audio is good, everyone please send a thumbs up at the or send I think a thumbs up is good. I think everyone had access to that.
From their parents at the board.
Alrighty. Looks like we still have some people coming in, but I'll go ahead and get started, and then if I need to reiterate anything later, I can. So hello everyone, my name is Constance Addie Ray. I prefer Addie as it is a nickname, and pretty much everyone calls me that. I'm coming to you tonight from Mobile, Alabama, which is a somewhat small to large port city in the very deep south. If I may ask, I think we have somebody that's not on mute, and that can be a little distracting as per background noise. But in any case, as I was saying, it's a sort of between small, big town, and I've lived here all my life. I'm currently living in the same house that I grew up in. Same bedroom, same everything since I was a kid. That being said, I come from a very small, immediate family background. My mother raised me as a single mother, and that's where I would like to start. I was born in August of '93, and I was also born 10 weeks premature. Now, what you have to understand about that is, although that was less than 30 years ago, even just with that short amount of time, the medical technology was not what it is now. So when I was born that early, the doctors came into my room and they told my mom, "You'll be lucky if she makes it 15 minutes now." This was very devastating for my mother because she was in her late 30s, had other pregnancies before, and had suffered miscarriages. So this was her last shot, and she really wanted a child. And she had also prayed for a girl. And yes, my mother does pray, as do I. So she had gotten what she prayed for. And so she says, by gosh, this child, if she lives, is going to have, the life that pretty much anybody else would have. So 72 hours later, I suffered bleeding in the brain, which brought on what is called cerebral palsy. Most of the time in the medical world, it is abbreviated down to CP. It can affect people in various ways, from the physical to the mental. I was lucky in that the only thing really affected was my physical. Everything else works just fine. I can't walk and I can't drive, but everything else functions. So the first thing my mom did when I was released from the hospital in November of 93 was planning to take me on the road. At the time, she was a full-time professional dog handler, which is any of you that watch things like Westminster and that sort of thing, she would travel to the shows that were put on to prepare for Westminster and was paid to show people dogs for them so that they could go to Westminster. So come December of 1993, I was at my first dog show. I was still on apparatuses to help me breathe and that sort of thing because my breathing was temporarily affected by my early birth. But she insisted that, I get out there and see the world from a very early age. In my early childhood, I traveled all over the United States, places like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, all of those places that my mom had been during her childhood. A lot of that stuff I don't necessarily remember because I was a little girl, but it did plant in me what some people refer to as the travel bug. So she did that for the first 5 years, travel around showing dogs with her business partner and me in tow. But then it came time for me to start kindergarten, which means you can't really travel around that much except for on the weekends. So my mom enrolled me in school and took on a full-time job at the University of South Alabama. Now here's where my interest in disability really starts to kick in. In elementary school, they saw that I have the condition that I have, and the powers that be in the school system figured she's not going to be able to learn anything. So they didn't give me the basics of reading and math and all that stuff you're supposed to get in kindergarten and first grade. And come the end of first grade, my mom found out, withdrew me from school, took me home and taught me by herself for a while until she could find a new school. Long story short, come second grade, I was ahead several grade levels in vocabulary, math, and reading. And so by the time I was 11, I started really becoming aware of the world around me, and I started looking around and I said, goodness gracious, every time my mother and I want to go somewhere, say out to eat, the movies, etc., the first thing she has to worry about is, can Addie get in? Can she get to the ladies' room and so on and so forth, things like that, which I know these are very sensitive topics, but even if you're just in the parking lot, you have to think, is there a curb cut? Is she going to be able to go on the curb, etc.? And even then, during school hours, I was supposed to have something that's called an IEP, which is basically says this is what this student needs to succeed on a level equal to her peers. For me, I needed special desks, extra time on test, and a few other accommodations. These pieces of information were supposed to be provided to my teachers before the school year even started. But let me give you a little inside hint. It never happened that way. So what I would have to do is every time school started, I would have to go to my teachers and say, Mr. or Mrs., whichever the case may be, in a few weeks you'll be getting a sheet of paper that lists all of my accommodations out to you, but in the meantime, this is what I need. And that's really where it started. From there, I couldn't help thinking to myself, there has to be a better way to do this. There has to be a better way to let people know that this is what needs to be done. These are the pieces of equipment that need to be provided, and so on and so forth. And in the world that we live in today, there are systems that are supposed to help with this. The main one is what's called the Department of Rehabilitation Services. Each state has one. My state is, of course, the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services. They're supposed to follow a child that is on their case roster from early childhood through adulthood to becoming successful in a career. Let me give you a little hint about that. While I can't speak for other people without their permission, my personal experience was a 24-year-long nightmare. And what I mean by a 24-year-long nightmare is if I needed anything from a new wheelchair to a proper vehicle to get that wheelchair around in to help paying for my education, I was always put on the bottom of the list and given excuse after excuse to insurance to everything else as to why I did not qualify for that particular assistance. And my mother and I were constantly having to fight tooth and nail with these people in order to get what I needed. In fact, my business that I have now, Access for All LLC, actually came out of one of those disputes. In early 2017, my mother and I had a roundtable meeting with my counselors at the Department of Rehabilitation Services and all the people that had a handle in whether or not I would get a chair that I was trying to get, which I do have now. It is a custom-made chair from a company that I personally endorse called the Standing Company. And basically what it does is it does everything that a power chair does, but it's really cool in that I push a couple levers and it can stand me up. Unfortunately, I can't show you how it works right now because I can't use it while sitting at the computer. But long story short, we had several hours worth of meeting that day. And they said, in order for us to justify getting you that chair, we have to show our bosses, our higher ups, that would be beneficial for your career. And based on what you want to do, here's what we suggest. We suggest that you start your own business, bring the proof back to us, and then we'll get you the chair. And so I said fine. And so it took me about 1.5 years to get all the initial paperwork in order, applying for business name, business license, all the usual stuff you do when you start a business, okay? And come early 2018, I got my first client, which happened to be my city's Office of Engineering. And then I took all that paperwork back to the head of the rehabilitation office, and they looked at what that first client had paid me, and they said, your business does not make enough money. Therefore, what you are going to have to do is, along with running your business, get a part-time, full-time, 9-to-5 type job that pays you minimum wage in order for us to justify your chair to our bosses. And I'm thinking, this doesn't sound right, but I'd signed the paper for what they called supported employment, which was supposed to help me get that job that I mentioned under duress, because I was told by the person in power at the time that if I did not go that route, I would have to pay $7,000 out of pocket towards that chair. And my mother and I were not in a position to do so due to the fact that my mother had been the victim of several car wrecks in 3 years, 3 car wrecks in 3 years, okay? And so I signed that piece of paper, and supported employment was never able to find me anything. But in the meantime, I was hired by a lawyer's office whose name I cannot mention for client privacy purposes to be an expert witness in ADA violation related cases. And they were paying me $2.50 an hour. And I said to myself, I can't possibly do part-time job and everything that goes into being an expert witness and not wind up blowing either my new employer or the lawyer job. Somebody was going to suffer. And so I called the person in charge of that office, of the Rehabilitation Services office, and I told them about this, and they proceeded to try and accuse me of fraud. They claimed that I must not want to work since I wasn't taking this part-time job, and yet, as I mentioned, I had just been offered a very lucrative contract. And so long story short, I reported that person to their proper authorities, which happened to be the state commissioner, and they suffered the disciplinary consequences, which I am almost positive was termination of their position. So not long before that person was terminated, I got a letter saying that, in essence, that I was being removed from the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services program because I was, for lack of a better term, a combative client. Well, quite frankly, I was happy not to have to go back and forth with ADRS anymore, because by the end of it, like I said, this had been a 24-year-long nightmare with other stories involved. But even with ADRS gone, I still had a problem. And that problem was that I could not grow my business without losing access to certain disability assistance that I use to pay utility bills on the house that my mother and I live in. And that is due to policy called SSDI, or Social Security Disability Income, which in essence says, and it varies from state to state, but it basically says, in order to get financial assistance, the person on disability cannot make, in Alabama at least, more than between $1,200 and $1,600 in a household of two, which is what my mom and I are considered. And so therefore, for example, if I had a good month where a client paid me that much to do a speaking event or another service that I provide for them, out the window my disability check would go. And then therefore the next month, if I had not such a good month, where would those utility bills come from? And when I first met the Evolution of Leadership team, that's where I was sitting, tossing this around in my head. How am I ever going to grow my business if I can't get past this particular issue? And so I contacted the business coach, which I worked with in 2017, to write my original business plan. And he looked at my situation and he said, and here comes the cool part, and this is what I'm working on now, you need to file to be taxed as what is called an S Corp. Because if you are an S Corp, it basically, in essence, means you can grow your business to however much you can grow it. It can become as lucrative as any business out there. And then you pay yourself out of that money a salary that does not go past this limit. And then once your business grows to a point where you can pay your own bills, if you want to get off of your disability, that's fine. But in the meantime, you have a way of paying yourself without constantly being stuck in that particular trap of choosing between your benefits and your growing of your business. Now, I know that I haven't really spoken a lot about what my business does, but if you'll notice from what I'm saying, disability and personal life, they really do, in a sense, go hand in hand. And wherever you go, you're interacting with businesses, retails, restaurants, hotels, etc., that sort of thing. And so what I've spent a lot of my time doing is educating these businesses on, this is what the ADA is, this is how it works, this is what you need to do to be in compliance. If you don't, you're looking at between, the fines can start at $75,000 the first offense, and then go up from there, and you can be fined more than once. And really and truly, it's a bad idea all the way around not to be proactive about this sort of thing, because if you're not, you're losing potential employees, potential clientele, and of course, potential revenue. Now, you may be saying, well, what does all this have to do with me? It doesn't really relate to me, and perhaps and this sort of thing isn't necessarily your alley, but the reason I'm so passionate about this sort of thing is because I've been asking myself a question, and I hope that these evolution of leadership events make you ask yourselves, which is, what can I do to create a better future for myself and for others? And that's really, in essence, what my business is about. And thanks to this S Corp situation, which I'm working on now, that will give me an opportunity to do this. So I have no idea where I am on time. I may even be ahead of time, but whenever you're ready to start questions, I'm ready to take them.
That was powerful. So I would definitely like to ask for a round of applause for Addie, even though everyone is muted. Thank you very much, Addie, for the story, for sharing your life story. It's very difficult for people to tell their life story, and I love how you were very open about it. So definitely thank you very much for that. And also, guys, I would like to mention that if you like to rewatch this video for any reason, it will be on our YouTube, and the link is here in the chat. So thank you so much, Addie, for that. Richard, would you like to continue? Do you have anything to say, or Alexis, or Angel?
Yeah. So I just wanted to remind you guys that at the end of this event, we are going to speak a little bit about our Friday, tomorrow's event. So if anybody's interested in furthering their leadership skills to a heightened degree with different a larger spectrum of knowledge, we're gonna have 3 speakers. So if you guys are interested in that, we're going to stick around a little bit after the event.
Yep, and the link for that event tomorrow is actually in the chat too.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you guys for speaking on that. I definitely want to go ahead and open up the questions and answers portion. So we're gonna go ahead and ask the public, everyone on here. Does anyone have any questions for Addie in relation to her life story, in relation to leadership, and in relation to overcoming adversity? And please do not all come at once.
Yeah, you can go ahead and unmute your mics, guys. Go ahead and ask away.
See, Joseph is unmuted.
Yeah, so I had a question. I see. Would you like me to call you Addie or Constance? Is that how you pronounce it?
Addie would be better.
Okay, Addie. Yeah, Addie. First of all, thank you for sharing your life story, and I'd just like to know, I guess, well, technically, because I work with special education students, and I would just like to know, I kind of I work with kids with autism, so I kind of have like some knowledge of within that spectrum. Anyhow, I would just like to ask you, like, in school, pretty much, I know that there's services in school, like for example, there's like you said, the IEP that provide you with accommodation and so on and stuff. Does your business also focus, like, is it just like focus like in companies, like you said, in businesses, or do they also focus like in schools?
That's actually a very good question, because when I started it, yes, it did focus, more on the company end, but with my expansion and working on furthering my public speaking skills, I do hope to get involved more with schools, because I find that with a lot of students with disabilities, not everyone has for lack of a better term, a supportive encouragement section. Disability in several cultures, including the American culture, can be synonymous with shame, something to be hidden, and that's a real shame, because along with that disability that person, they have abilities, talents that need to be nurtured. I am actually working on a video project that I call Strides that focuses on showcasing those talents, particularly in the realm of entrepreneurship. To give you an example, someone may be autistic, but they could be really good with art. I saw this video once of this gentleman whose name I cannot remember. You should see the murals he creates. There's a doctor with CP that suffered physical deformities, I believe, in his hands and feet. He is certified to administer medicine in the United States and has several parents with disabled children that bring their children to him for treatment. But the thing of it was, to get his medical degree, he had to go out of the country because even though he had straight A's all through school, when it came time for him to apply to college, he applied to 12 different colleges and medical schools, and they all rejected him. And you want to know why? They told him, every single one, straight up, no parent and or patient is going to want to come to you because this sort of, your sort of situation makes them uncomfortable. And like I said, he has parents with disabled children in some manner or another flocking to his door. He can barely make enough appointments. So I suppose, as far as, I'm probably going a little overboard with your question, but yes, I do want to
No,
get.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you added that extra thing. And yeah, also, sorry to cut you off. I was gonna ask you also, do you have any like I guess any YouTube channels or any social media accounts that you promote your service?
Yes, I'm on Facebook. I have both a personal page. You can look up Addie Ray, ADDIERAY, and then I have my business page, Access for All. I have a LinkedIn page, and yes, I do have a YouTube channel. I can provide the link, but it's a good thing you mentioned that, because the Strides project I mentioned, it's going to be an ongoing interview project with other professionals with disabilities, and it launches no later than January, but possibly as early as sometime in December during the holidays, because the production is going very well.
Okay then. Well, yeah, if you just put that in the chat, I appreciate that. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question, Joseph. I'm gonna go ahead and open it up to someone else. Does anyone else have a question for Addie?
Hi, my name's Mary Irving, and thank you again, Addie, for sharing your life story. I'm in California, so sorry for entering a little later. But in any event, Addie, I wanted to ask you, I am an advocate for my sister who suffers from disabilities. One of them is being schizophrenic, but also her disability. She had a stroke, so she's kind of slides with her left side. My question is, I know that I am that advocate for her, but can you explain, or not explain, but just share the importance? Did you have an advocate when you were going through like setting up your business, or just getting your right medications and things like that? And what were the challenges that you saw, or do you think that we need more advocates for that? Because the issue I have is that if I don't speak up for her, it seems like she gets lost in the numbers. She's a number lost in the crowd.
Right, exactly.
And I guess people are well-meaning to do it, but they just don't.
Like, although our conditions are very different, what you're describing with your sister, I have seen a lot in my life, and I am blessed. And yes, I do use that word on purpose because, like I said, spiritual person in the house. That my mother, when I did not feel comfortable in a situation speaking up for myself, she was always the person that I could call on to handle an issue for me. Usually it involved a very stern, no nonsense conversation. with the other entity. We have a name for it in this house, and she's my mom. It's called doing the mom thing. In your case, it would probably be called doing the sister thing. But I've seen, as far as challenges I've seen everything from insurances such as Medicaid and Medicare tossing the ball back and forth as to who's responsible for paying for what, et cetera, et cetera. That actually led to me having to have an extra surgery once. Very painful, very costly on the insurance, which they would not have had to have paid for if they had taken care of the original problem. But really and truly, the problems that you're facing, it's not unique, and I can pretty much give you an educated guess as to why it happens. Okay, number one, the government system as it stands, it is overloaded with cases. I mean, one caseworker can have up to 50 plus people that they're supposed to be checking in with on a regular basis. And then to make matters even more complicated, there are the people like the lady I described to you in one of my stories who are exhibiting unscrupulous behavior and are a utter disgrace to the system that they are supposed to further and protect in good standing. One thing you have to realize is I'm afraid that a lot of people that go into this field, when they're looking at these case files, they don't understand it's not just numbers and it's not just money. You're, in a sense, they make decisions that impact people's lives, impact their futures. And they have to understand it's not just, are we going to spend $1,000 or are we going to spend $2,000? No, that $2,000 could mean the difference between, okay, is somebody going to be able to do what they want with their life, whether that's raising their kid, whether that's enjoying their golden years traveling, paying their taxes, contributing to society. It's just, in general, we don't seem to have an understanding that what we do in our professional lives, it affects other people. And that in the background is what I try to help people have a better understanding of. What you do affects something. There is a quote from one of my favorite movies that, although it's fictional, I believe has very real standing in real life. If you've ever seen the movie National Treasure, Nicolas Cage, the main actor, reads one of the main lines of the Declaration of Independence, and then he paraphrases it basically to say that it means if there's something wrong, those that have the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action. And I think that's where parents and advocates have to, I hate to use this term, but I don't know what other term to use, pick up the slack, because there's just a lack of passion in the system these days. And I really do think that's what's missing, the connectivity between how the system works and community, because disability and community really go hand in hand, but not everybody sees it. I don't know if that's making any sense or making things any clearer for you, but you're on mute.
Thank you, Addie. It did. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes. Go close that door, please.
Yeah, that definitely makes perfect sense to me. And Adi, I do have a question since we are on the topic of advocacy. I would like to ask you, how can everyday people like ourselves further advocate for this? How can we help? How can we support? Because there are multiple ways to help.
Right.
We can donate. Go ahead.
Well, I will say this, there are a lot of organizations out there that, were created to further disability-related rights and that sort of thing. Although I will say I'm not involved in a lot of them, but that is a personal choice for me. The reason I am not involved with a lot of them is because one of the main things they do in order to try and bring about the change that they want to see is protest. And personally, I don't believe in participating in protest because, as far as I can tell, 9 times out of 10, what happens when those people are out on the lawns chanting, trying to get the attention of the main person who they want to influence, is that person comes out onto that area and all they see is a group of people standing between them and one of two things. One, their afternoon latte, or two, their next very important meeting. And long story short, what happens is the police are called, people are dragged off the lawn, process, maybe even spend a few hours in the general hold at the jail. And I'm thinking to myself, not so much, because those situations can lead to points of violence, even if they weren't originally intended to be that way. And quite frankly, I've never seen myself comfortable with being stuck in the middle of that sort of situation. So as far as what can be done, the only thing I can really tell you from my experience is to do in a way to do what I do, which is I don't spend a lot of my time writing letters. I look at a specific situation and I say to myself, okay, what needs to be done about this? For instance, you see somebody being made fun of, demeaned by another person because of their situation. The best thing you can do is, strike up just a general conversation with that person. You may feel a little uncomfortable at first. That's normal. Sometimes when somebody comes up to me and starts a conversation, if I don't know them, I'm a little uncomfortable, but I don't initially dismiss them. I mean, I use the discretion that I was taught by my mother from a very young age for safety reasons. But conversation is the most important thing, because we all have different ways of dealing with things. Some people think that protest is the right way to deal with these issues. Me, I find it better to do things like public speaking and figuring out who exactly I want to work with in order to combat these problems. For me, it's more of an intellectual process than simply yelling, because in my experience, although there have been people that I wanted to say some choice words to in public so that the entire world would know what they did, that I considered to be not right, I figured, well, in the long run, that person can just say something that's going to then make my job a lot harder because I lost my temper. And what is that going to do if I say wind up in jail somewhere? I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Understood. Yeah, thank you so much for your answer, Addie. Thank you. And during the meantime, I was able to find Addie's website. It's in the chat right now. So if anyone wants to check that out, go ahead and check it out. And yeah, the YouTube should also be in the front page of the website.
That is one of my older videos. I was going to put the direct access to the YouTube in the chat, but I can't quite move fast enough. Angel, if you could do me a favor, if you could go to YouTube, and basically if you put in access for all /strides, it should come up with a picture of my logos on it, and the subscribe button and so forth, and just
Okay, awesome. I'll go check that out right now.
I'll put something in the chat actually. Is that it?
Hold on 1 second. I think so. You guys, if there's any problem with the links, I apologize. Part of my thing is I can't write and or type very fast, so that's what the hold up is.
No worries. Well, yeah, that should be it for sure. If there's any reason that if the links are not working, definitely let us know in the chat, guys. So does anyone else have any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Yes.
I just want to say, honestly, thank you so much for telling your story. It is amazing just to hear the many things that you've gone through and that are going through. And I personally don't have a disability, but I know what it feels like to be despised or be looked down at. And yeah, I just want to say, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. I know personally it's not easy to go through something like that, much less tell it to an audience that you barely even know, or you don't even know how they're gonna react. And honestly, like I'm lost for words. Honestly, it's done me so much good, and it's basically what I needed in order to keep going at what I'm doing. And honestly, thank you so much for your time and for your story.
You're welcome.
Wonderful, wonderful. So yeah,
I think I have a question.
you have a question?
Yeah. Let me see. I would have, yeah, my question is, it's actually in relation to leadership. So what do you think is the most important thing about leadership? Well, when you think of leadership, what's the most important factor that has helped you? You just mentioned how you were able to have even like, I mean, earlier before this event started, you talked about how you're in a better situation now with your business. What, in regards to leadership, helped you get there? You know, like what was the defining factor?
Right. Well, you know, the I think really it goes back to something that my mother has told me since I was a child. I even mentioned it in my biography that I sent you guys. It's this saying that she uses with me, and it goes like this: you can't win if you don't buy a ticket. Now this doesn't always literally mean spending money to buy something. What it means is, okay, you want to change this problem? Okay, but if you don't do something, it's not going to change. Okay, for instance, I could have, when they were back in 2017, when ADRS was giving me all this trouble, and they said, you have to do this and you have to do that, and they were accusing me of all these horrible things, I could have just said, forget this, whatever word you want to use, I'm out here, and shut down everything, gone into complete shutdown mode, and ignored it. But instead, I took the action to have the people that were doing the unscrupulous things properly dealt with. So it's really just a matter of don't give up. And I know it sounds really redundant, but that's really what it is. And also, that question I posed to you guys earlier, what can you do to create a better future for yourselves and others? If you don't know the answer to that question right now, that's fine. I get that a lot of you in here are younger than me. I'm only 27. Some of you are barely starting college, and you're like, oh my God, is she serious? But the thing that is, it's a very personal answer for some. As for me, it's a personal answer. I personally believe in God, yes, and that may not be, where all of you stand, but I believe that God, got me through that initial medical problem, still breathing, because he wants me to do this work, okay? And that's the only way I can describe it. So it's very personal for me, and whatever answer you find to that question, whether you're a spiritual person or not, it's gonna be personal for you. And that's what's gonna drive you. Now I'm going to be honest with you guys on one more thing. it's not always gonna be just something bad comes along and you remember what I said tonight, poof, everything's fine. No. At one point when I did, when I got out of high school, I had a full ride scholarship to the University of Alabama. And my first year, great GPA, all the, normal college stuff. I didn't go to parties or drink just simply because that wasn't my thing. But in essence, everything was going great. And then starting my second year, my health started to decline. And it got really, really bad. I mean, horrible, acid reflux, couldn't sleep properly at night, And by the end of it, going to class, I could barely get myself out of my dorm room, okay? And in the midst of that, I was going through ADRS-related problems at the time, and it got so bad that, yes, I considered the irreversible. I briefly considered the all-time irreversible, which is suicide. At the time, I was on a supplement that, if taken in mass, can result in death, the irreversible. It's very difficult for me to think about, but when, and talk about. But when I looked down that hole, which thankfully was only for about a brief 5 minutes, and thank God I was out of my dorm room at the time and did not have the pills with me. But I looked down that hole and I briefly considered going back to my dorm room and swallowing those pills, which I, in good conscience, cannot tell you what they were. I thought of my mom and I said, as miserable as I am, good Lord, I can't do that to my mother. She waited, 30-something odd years for a child. I can only imagine what that phone call would be like for her. And this was winter of 14, and come the end of that year, Christmas time of that year, after final exams, way before that time, my grades were in the tank, which also meant my school funding was in the tank. So guess what I had to do right after final exams that year? I had to call my mom, and I had to say, Mom, when you come up here to get me for Christmas, be prepared to take, all my personal belongings, including me, back home with you, because I've got to drop out of school. Now, can you imagine if any of you have ever had to have that discussion with your parents? I'm dropping out of school. I had put that conversation off for months because, my mom raised me as a single mom. She, always encouraged me to get an education. I was terrified of that conversation, but was she happy with me? No. But she basically told me, look, honey, you gotta take care of your health first, because if you don't take care of your health first, you can't do anything for anybody, and that's not going to be a very fulfilling life. So,
Wow, that was a whole lot of knowledge to absorb, and thanks for sharing that, Addie. Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, it's very true.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I was to say, I just want to say real quick, the thing she mentioned about health is very, very true. Too many people do allow their health to just drop. But definitely glad that you got out of that, Addie. Let's see. And like Emmanuel said, does anybody else have any questions? Please do not all come at once.
I have one.
Oh, there we go.
Anyone else before I started? No? All right. So hopefully my question is not the last one. So Addie, thank you so much for all your knowledge and, to bring this value for the people. So I would like to have a question about, like, in your leadership perspective, what is the best advice that you can tell, other people with disabilities, to overcome, this phase, like, because they have some of them, some mindsets in which they're not able, to move forward, to overcome, this adversity. So
Right.
What is the best advice that you can give?
Mm-hmm. Well, the best advice I can give is, you know, we're not robots. We each have our, our own thoughts, our own passions, our own abilities, and we're thinking, I want to do. Somebody somewhere right now is thinking, just along with their disability, I want to do X with my life. I want to finish school. I want to get married. I want to travel. I want to start my business, or I want to, make enough money to where I will be able to pay for my care and not have to worry about where it's coming from. And probably some other things I haven't mentioned, et cetera, you name it. But whichever way you look at it, that truly relates to doing something not only for yourself, but for other people. You have things you want to do in this life. The only thing I can really tell you is, don't not do it. Because if you listen to the what we call the medical model, which is somebody with a disability, they can't do X, Y, Z. They can't get a job. They can't have long-term committed relationships. They can't become respected in their field. If you listen to all that stuff, if you're a spiritual person, it does things to the soul. And even if you're not, it does something to your insides that is so negative that I can't necessarily describe it just using everyday language. It's so personal that it really just can't be described in words. And really and truly, at some point when I became an adult, I had to look at it and say, okay, I'm in my 20s now. I get that there are people out there that want to help me, but I also understand that there are people out there that they don't necessarily believe that I and other people should be, living everyday lives or want to have these things. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't have time for that sort of negative attitude.
All right. That's amazing. Thank you so much, for real.
Wow. That was real. You do not have time for that negative stuff. That's true.
We don't have time for that.
Wow. Let's see here. Did anyone else want to ask a question? Or have a comment? Oh,
Addie, yeah, I would like to ask, so is there any advice you would give us, mainly, let's say, how to approach, well, I know every person who has a disability, the disability is different, but is there any advice in general, like that you would give us?
General advice, okay. General advice, and this is going to take some sort of mental processing on your part, meaning the person that wants to approach the other person. Okay, when you look at a person, particularly with a person with a visible disability like mine is, I mean, you see me coming, you see the wheelchair, it's plain as day, it sticks out like a sore thumb that there's some sort of disability involved. And so I'm not a psychiatrist, but I've read things that sort of say that because of how general society works in this day and age, we're sort of pre-programmed to go to this mental place of that person is not smart, that person may be deaf or otherwise affected because it's obvious that they're challenged in some sort of way. My advice to you as far as approaching that sort of person, a person with a disability is, especially if it's clear as day that they have some sort of disability, before you approach them, you'll probably notice that stuff going off in your head, and you have to say to yourself before you start that conversation, okay, take a deep breath, so to speak, maybe count to 10, and remind yourself, this person has their own thoughts, their own opinions, and then you go up to them and you start that conversation. A lot of times we are encouraged as young children, um, don't stare, don't say, what's wrong with you, that sort of thing. Um, when I was younger, my grandmother used to take me to the mall to have lunch on regular occasions, and a lot of times, a situation like I just described would happen with young children. And I would always say to the parents, that's okay, let them ask, I'd rather they just come out and ask than assume. So it is, it's basically approach them with a mindset of respect. For instance, when you're walking into a professional place for an interview or for a meeting, you see yourself as equal to the people that you are about to have a interview or conversation with. Same thing goes for the rest of us. We go into we, meaning people with disabilities, we go into a professional situation, okay? And we don't, in general, we don't appreciate the first thing we're asked is, who's here with you? And I say that because it's happened to me before, and I'm like, I am a legal adult. I have state issued ID that approves I'm a legal adult. If I need, assistance of any sort, I will ask for it. But until then, I'm a regular customer, potential employee, whatever the case may be.
Thank you. Yeah, I also I was taught a term through my, I guess, training for school. There's like put persons first. So like they call it people first. So instead of like you said, like viewing the person as equal, or also people first is mainly no, just don't put the disability first. Put the the personality of the person first. Like you could describe, oh, he's a male, instead of just looking at his disability. So it mainly, I feel like putting the person first. Oh, that's how I was taught. And yeah, I just wanted to put it out there.
Somehow, one of my cats got into my bedroom. That's the noise you're hearing behind me. Is this cat is talking to me.
Mhm.
Let me see.
Angel, are you good on? Are we good on time still?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a question. I just wanted to check though too. So for you, Addie, from your experience, what has been one of the most powerful motivators for you to take action despite setbacks? What has pushed you and kind of fired you up the most?
Okay, well, that's actually a two-pronged answer because there are actually two things. Okay, one, it's my personal future. It really does have to come down to, excuse me, I'm starting to fumble my words, to providing for my own future. I have things that I want for my future. I want the successful career. I want to be able to pay for the assistance I'm going to need that eventually my mother will no longer be able to provide because she is already in her mid-60s and nobody can do it forever. And like I said, I will never be able to drive. That sort of thing. So it comes down to providing myself for that because I don't necessarily trust that people that don't necessarily know me, that are simply handed my case, in a file, are going to take care of that forever, okay? And then it comes down to more of the worldview. I look around and I see people that are artists, doctors, brilliant economists, or, fashion geniuses, look at every industry field you can possibly imagine, and there's somebody with a disability who is already in that field or is, growing up, and is interested in going into that field, and why should they be denied that opportunity? Because that, again, goes to them being able to do the things I just described. Family, travel, whatever matters to them. I can't necessarily tell you, but it's, if you think about what we consider to be the American dream, which is, having the house, having the family, all that sort of thing, that all ties in. So one, making sure I have that opportunity, and two, making sure other people have that opportunity, and also, and this is where the business part comes in, making sure that people that are not taught this sort of stuff from an early age are not then deprived of their livelihoods and their chance to provide to other people because they were not given the advantage of this knowledge from an early age. Because those fines that I mentioned that businesses are given, if they're found to be in violation, it can ruin their livelihoods, which then everything they're putting into the economy, it's gone. So it affects everybody that touches the economy. It's a circle from A to B to C to D. Everything connects. You just have to look for it. When I look at a situation, I look at everything through a sort of lens. I look at say I'm planning to go on a trip. I have to consider other things that people wouldn't necessarily consider. For instance, I'm going to a city that I've never been to. Again, it goes, can I get into the building? All that stuff I mentioned earlier. It just connects. One example I like to use, the coffee shop, okay? You're a coffee shop owner, and day in and day out, even in coronavirus with social distancing, you have people coming in and out of your restaurant, spending money on your coffee and other things. And what are they doing? They're having a conversation with their neighbors about what's going on in your life, blah, blah, blah. Some of the greatest projects in the world have come out of conversation from coffee shops. And guess what? Some of the people going into those coffee shops, they live with disabilities, and fall under the protection of what I further, which is the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. Those people, they're patrons, they're potential investors, they're potential employees. You could meet your future spouse in a coffee shop, okay? And if that disappears, every contribution that business has made to people's lives, and will make to people's lives, poof, gone. It affects, even the absence of your small family shop affects society.
What'd you say?
Oh.
Hello? Huh? Hi, Maisha. How are
Maybe
you?
Do you have a
is it
I was over Brian's. I'm doing that webinar that I signed us up for. I thought it's with disabilities people, so that's good. Plays into Alice. But they're almost done anyway.
That,
Yeah.
please.
Huh?
If Mary,
You have a,
your mic is on.
no worries, I muted her, so
Oh, I wasn't sure if she had a
Back
question.
to what I was saying, what do you call it? But that makes a lot of sense, Addie, and I hear you, because it's that constraint that's not even given to you by someone you know. And that makes sense. I totally understand that. I would hate, honestly, to be told I can't do this or that by people who haven't even faced me. They haven't, I haven't made contact with. That's a very serious matter, and I definitely I see that for sure.
Yep. Let me see. Does anyone have any final questions or comments? Remember to be a leader and also invest in yourself as well. Leaders ask questions, right? Let's see.
By any
All right.
chance, Addie, has there been anybody that has kind of followed your lead and followed your guide that was kind of inspired, that also had a disability, maybe somebody of youth that kind of gravitated to what you speak about?
It's interesting that you should ask that question because it has been a little, shall we say, difficult to make that sort of breakthrough. I think that now with the changes I'm making in my business, transitioning to the S Corp, that will provide me a lot more opportunity in the speaking and educational arena. Right now, I actually have a young lady who's working for me on a volunteer basis. She does not necessarily have a disability, but nonetheless, I think that what we're working on is making an impact on her. She is actually in the acting industry. She's finishing up high school and she's editing my strides videos that I'm making for me, and that will be excellent on her resume and sort of just give her a perspective that she might not otherwise have had. In the future, I hope that the people you're describing, especially the up and coming young professionals, will gravitate towards this way of thinking. It's not necessarily that I want to tell people how to live their lives. It's that I want them to live their lives. I don't want them to put off being a doctor or going to welding school or whatever else it is, simply because they have disability attached. The basic purpose of the ADA is to allow people with disabilities the opportunity to participate in everyday society to the fullest extent that they can. The reason why ADA is not more fully enforced to that extent, almost, yeah, it is now 30 years later, because it was put into law in 1990, is because there's one mistake, from my educated opinion, that the Bush Senior administration made. They had this great federal law in place that they intended for the entire nation to follow. But since it was early 1990s, guess what? Computers were still this big, huge, hulking thing that you put in, rooms, and the internet practically non-existent. So they had this thing that they wanted the entire nation to follow, and yet they had no way of telling people in mass, okay? This is the new rule. This is, this is the way, we're going to approach things. And so then what happened? People that were mere school children were growing up, never being taught how this stuff works, never being taught from an early age. This person is just like you. They just have these extra situations attached. Just like, you look at a person and you don't know that they're bankrupt or homeless. It's not necessarily cut and dry, black and white, but it's just, I believe that it's a perpetuating situation that can be alleviated through proper education and proactiveness, meaning don't wait until that business is already non-accessible or that person has been denied every right in the book, now get out in front of it and do something about it before it hits you.
Yeah, that's very true. I like the fact that you mentioned, how there was no real way of spreading this kind of information, and that also makes us question, what are they really teaching us in the education system? Like even a lot of the information that you were talking about the ADA, that's stuff that I haven't even heard about, right? Because I haven't even had like the exposure of having someone close to me, or like in my immediate family or friends having a disability. And that sometimes that information isn't, it's there now because of the internet for sure, but sometimes even then it's like not marketed enough to the general public. So I do definitely see how that would be of use, and it should definitely be in the education system, I think.
Mm. I personally would vividly advocate that just like you have to have basic knowledge of history and basic, knowledge of another language to graduate high school, I would argue that you need to have basic knowledge of the ADA in order to graduate high school. Now, I'm not saying that you need to have in-depth college level knowledge, because the ADA, it's not necessarily, legally speaking, it's law that's X amount of pages long, okay? But in reality, that's maybe 10% of it, because the legislation can't possibly keep up with what's going on the ground, okay? I'll give you an example. The main website for keeping up with ADA stuff is very simple. The government website is ada.gov, okay? And you go on there and you look up ADA architectural guidelines. The most recent ones were from 2010, okay? That tells you what the dimensions of, the buildings are supposed to be, as far as space and doorways and et cetera, et cetera. It's really in depth, but it's what you use if you're building a space to ADA standards. But it's 10 years old. That's why the concept of universal design, which is basically looking at a situation, in this case a building, and saying, how can we build this to accommodate as many people as possible, from the short to the tall, to the blind, to the wheelchair user, and everything in between? How can we build this building to be of use to everybody? That, in essence, is what universal design is, and it sort of goes beyond the ADA itself. So really and truly, my whole point in this diatribe is that the ADA at its ground level is a federal law, but it's so much deeper and more expansive than just that, because it seeps into everyday life. And I reiterate this again. The piece of paper itself, it's merely a guideline to tell you what by law is covered under protection, because the legislative body just can simply not keep up with the advances that go on the ground.
Wow. Yeah, that's very true. All right, so I'll go ahead and just do a final call for questions to see anyone who's wants to give a last question, and after that, Addie, so I forgot to tell you too. So after this event is over, we're also going to send an email to everyone who came out to the event, and everyone who signed up, and then we're also going to add your links, your website link and your YouTube link also, just so we can also spread the word.
Yeah, and just so you're aware, on my, if you ever want to get in touch with me and ask me more questions in depth that you may not have felt comfortable asking on camera, or you thought were too in depth to answer during this time period. My email and phone number is on the website under the contact section. Just so you're aware, my personal preference is a phone call, text, video chat. The reason I do it that way is, like I said, typing and writing takes me absolutely forever, and it's just more effective and expedient to do video chat. If you would prefer email, I will not complain. But the other way is my preferred way of doing things.
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you so much for that information. So does anyone have a final question? And then after that, we can go ahead and see, and then send everybody that email. Yeah. Anyone who hasn't went yet? Oh, did someone say something?
I was just gonna say, I know I ran us pretty fast and got us done a little early, but I consider that to not necessarily be a bad thing.
Oh wait, what happened? Sorry.
Yeah, I went so fast that I got us done early, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's not bad at all. Because I think that you provided so much value with the story anyways. Yeah. And also this information, we're also gonna be posting this on YouTube as well. So people always have access to this information for sure. So very excited for that. All right, doesn't seem like there's a last question. All right, let's go ahead and just close it up then. So thank you so much, Addie, for being on here and talking about your amazing story and also how much of a powerful leader you are. I think a lot of people have a concept of leadership where they think a specific person is a leader or someone has to have, look a certain way to be a leader, but you've proven yourself to, show that you're a leader. You're a leader who's, started her own business despite the disabilities and the adversity that you had to overcome. And you're continuously doing that. So very, very proud of you. You already know. If you ever need anything, Addie, just do let me know. You also have our contact information on Evolution of Leadership. Also, if you have any questions, phone calls work as well. But yeah, thank you so much. Does anybody else have a final thing they would like to say to Addie before hopping off the chat?
Just to restate that we all for you in here, and also for you guys, for our viewers, anything you guys need, EOL is here for you to provide this value and to expand these positive mindsets to everyone.
Yeah,
Awesome.
And we're also going to talk about the lead series right after we're done. So stick around, and we'll answer any questions if you guys are interested in the next step of increasing your ability to lead.
Yep.
Cool. So Addie,
right.
would you like to say your